think we'll get started. We'll get a few stragglers as we come. But thanks for being here, everybody. Tracy's here from the Hunger Task Force. I drive by them a lot on I-94 in Holly. And every year our confirmation group goes and helps sort for a couple at night. And then we're going to do a group, I think March 1st is our date.
Wonderful.
So if you want to help sort, it's a real fun experience. It's like 2 to 4 hours of assembly line, so it's just enough to make this seem fun and not seem regimented or like every day. But a really cool opportunity to help. We're here today to learn a little bit more about advocacy through the Hunger Task Force. There's lots of changes to the food laws in Wisconsin. And I'm hoping you can help us to navigate through that in some way, shape, or form. So thanks for being here, and hopefully we can share beyond this room too. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Trace Mattavelli, and I'm the educator at Hunger Task Force. Prior to working at Hunger Task Force, I worked in North Shore Police Department for Fox Point and Bayside, then Sheriff's Department, Milwaukee County Sheriff, and also worked as an EMT in EMS, Emergency Medical Services. So in paramedic base. So I've worked as a 911 operator with public servants, as a public servant, and I've also educated at MPS, Milwaukee Public Schools, for 6 years. So 25 years total working in community service as a public servant. And it wasn't until a year ago that I accepted the position at Hunger Task Force that I really understood hunger in our community. So although I was educating those kids at MPS that were hungry and living in poverty, I didn't understand this perspective of it. So I hope from this you'll understand a little bit of how hunger impacts our community. Hunger Task Force is a food bank in Wisconsin. We are a local nonprofit organization. We are not a national corporation. Sometimes people confuse us with Feeding America. Our branding is blue, free and local, born and raised here in Milwaukee, and then Feeding America is a national corporation. So we actually pride ourselves in being able to say we're free and local, born and raised here, and able to distribute food free of charge. Hunger Task Force, we started back in '74. This is what I was referring to earlier as an advocacy group, women from Milwaukee advocating for children of Milwaukee, and that they are served school breakfast. And we've really made awesome gains just recently regarding that I'll cover. But our mission is twofold. So if you really want to wrap your head around what this hunger involves, it's really twofold in that there's advocacy work that's involved in ending future hunger, but preventing hunger today. And that's what we do. It's twofold. Our mission statement: preventing hunger right now through providing food through our network to people in need, but also promoting policies that will end future hunger. And that's where I'm at the advocacy part, the advocacy department. Preventing hunger today, somebody had referenced this sign. We're off of I-94 in Holly Road, right? You said you passed it. You passed it daily. Yep. Give folks shout outs. And at our food bank, we obtain food from different avenues or different entities. Approximately 60% of the food that we have at our food bank is from federal commodities. We get an additional amount of food from our farm and fish hatchery. Has anybody heard of our farm? Okay, this is awesome because you'll all have heard of it. It's wonderful. We'll talk more about that. Purchase about 3% of our food is purchased, and typically it's baby formula and baby food, and that's expensive. People do not donate it. And then our food drives and donations. We currently have food for families, food drives right now, and getting ready for our holiday bins I'll talk a little bit about. But we also do one just for peanut butter, which is awesome. It's important. So I kick off these food drives in schools, and I have all the little kids saying it's nutritious and delicious, which is true, non-perishable, high in protein. It's a good food source. But it also goes to homes that don't have refrigerators, don't have stoves, and don't have utensils to eat. So peanut butter is awesome. From that food drive, 56,000 jars of peanut butter were donated. I mean, that's phenomenal. In total, you take all of these entities together, 9.4 million pounds of food were distributed free of charge, collected and donated free of charge into our community. We have 7 trucks. In the morning, they load up and they go out into the pantry network. That's an incredible amount of food. Our farm. It's located in Franklin, Wisconsin, across from the House of Corrections. It is owned by the county government, and what we do is we have a lease with them, a long-term lease. in which we can work the farm, 200 plus acres, 173 of them are tillable, and currently we're growing on about 90 acres. It has an oak savanna along the river. Didn't know what that was until I started working at Hunger Task Force. Oak trees that are grown at large, and as a result, the understory has native plants to Wisconsin. So we are restoring the oak savanna. It's one of, I think, 2 in Milwaukee County that are recorded. Fish hatchery, we have, this basin or pool there is one of approximately 20 in our fish hatchery. Fish are grown in the hatchery, turned out into retention ponds, and then distributed to all the Milwaukee County parks, the fish. So if you have a Milwaukee County park with a lagoon or a pond that has fish, they grew up at our fish hatchery. So that's in exchange for the lease we have with the county. That we distribute fish to the county parks. Raised garden beds. We maintain ongoing instruction in classrooms. This is really important to educate kids. We have a demonstration kitchen through great donations. We're able to develop this. Kids feel like junior chef in the classroom. It's awesome. Learn how to handle food. You can go on the walking trails through the oak savanna, out into the fields. And this right here is a photograph of one of the retention ponds. So the fish start in that fish hatchery, they go to the retention ponds, and then one of the volunteer opportunities is scooping all the fish out of there with waders on into the trucks and then distributed to the parks, which is awesome. Greater than 25 varieties of fruits and vegetables are grown at the farm, which is awesome because within 48 hours of being harvested, they're distributed into our network. And when you have a network of people who visit the pantries and are living on non-perishable food items, this fresh produce is awesome. And did you have a question?
Yeah, where did you say the farm is?
It's in Franklin, 6800 block of, 9000 block of 68th Street, right across from the House of Corrections. It's right off Orion Road. It's about 9 miles south of Milwaukee.
Okay.
2.5 million pounds of produce over the last 3 growing seasons were distributed to the network. I mean, it's an incredible amount of food. And what's awesome about it, a lot of things, but one is this fresh produce is so well received. And what's real nice about Hunger Task Force, in my position specifically, is I get around everywhere and I'm able to see where the food goes, where it comes from and where it goes, and then understand the need for it. I gave a tour to some pediatricians that are real interested in childhood nutrition, of course, and they tour Hunger Task Force, and I present to them. I took them on a tour at the farm, and the field had looked like a war zone because we had just harvested all the cabbage. So not very picturesque and aesthetic, but they could get the feel of the harvest and how it happens. 10,000 pounds of cabbage were harvested the day before. And then what was awesome is the next day I went into the pantries to do my pantry outreach and keep close with the people that it's serving, and I see it all displayed like this. So this is a cabbage. Within 24 to 48 hours, it's distributed fresh into the pantry network. All the apples from our farm, I've never seen a grocery store that had more peppers, and here they are at our one pantry. The enlightening part about all this was the coordinator of the pantry said to me, and imagine this will all be gone an hour after the pantry opens tomorrow. You know, I mean, that's incredible. And those are the things that kind of resonate with me. You see, it's awesome and it's beautiful and it's kind of an interesting thing because in a way it's sad, but it's awesome. You know, so it's that preventing hunger today, and we'll talk about how to end it altogether in the future. This is our mosaic of our network. Each one of those balloons designates one of the pantries in our network. 52 food pantries. We have additional soup kitchens or meal sites, homeless shelters, and senior distribution centers. And these are the numbers. A little glitch. All right. These are the numbers that actually visit our pantries. This was enlightening to me. Just the pantry network, nearly 36,000 people visit those per month. I was presenting once and I said 36,000 and somebody had finished my statement and said per year. That's just unbelievable. These numbers are per month. I mean, right? It is. It's insane. You know, and then you look at the percentage of those recipients of the food or that frequent the pantries, 40% of them are children. Same thing. Soup kitchen, 37,000, 12%. Homeless shelters, almost 19,000, 22% are children. Senior distribution sites, 9,000 to 10,000 seniors visit those locations. 86 to 90 senior distribution sites that are now being In addition to our deliveries of they call them stock boxes or boxes, federal commodities that are provided for seniors, we're following it up with our mobile market. And they're just starting to launch that and explain that in the news. I just saw actually a commercial for it this morning where Pick and Save will pull up with a truck, our Fresh Mobile, and allow seniors to purchase food using food share and cash to purchase fresh produce. Did you have a question?
And where are these? Are these in Milwaukee County?
These are all predominantly Milwaukee County, some outlying. We have some in Waukesha. If we end up with surplus, a lot of food, we have auxiliary sites that will also distribute food to. But these are predominantly Milwaukee County. I'll show you the previous slide. So this is this is pretty much our network. That corner, the burgundy and the dark, that's the Granville district, like 107th and just north of Good Hope. So we have Bayside and then down to Oak Creek. It's predominantly local. We do have some, like I had stated, in Janesville, Waukesha. The mosaic again, but if you look at that with numbers, the dark blue, the purple balloons, greater than 2,000 people served per month. Food deserts are something to try to wrap your head around and really better understand what it is. It's just where an environment. USDA defines it as there isn't any nutritious food available to folks within a 1 mile radius. They occur in urban and rural areas, and we'll talk about zip code 53206 right here in Milwaukee. That is a food desert. This blows my mind because this should not exist. I've traveled around the world, Asia, Africa, Haiti, Central America, and I really haven't seen hunger and poverty in those places like I've seen it right here. That always kind of amazes me. An example of a food desert would be zip code 53206, and just recently, November 5th, they published, I think the Journal Sentinel published an article about this zip code. It's Capitol Drive to North Avenue, 27th Street to I-43. Okay, so that's where 53206 is. It's considered a food desert. Think about it, 47% of people live in poverty. Male unemployment, 36% of the folks, males there between ages of 20 and 64 have jobs as compared to 67% outside of 53206. Journey to work, 45 minutes they tack on to and from work. When you're living in poverty, life is a hustle. Some people have this myth, they think people who are living in poverty are lazy. No, they're working very, very hard to make ends meet, including obtaining food. They also use more likely to use public transportation, so they don't have transportation. Food deserts, people without food are exacerbated without having transportation. The reason I like this slide is this data was just presented to me just shortly after we had that strike. Milwaukee County buses had a strike. And the only thing that made the news was the negative impact it'd have on Summerfest. People going to Summerfest. And I think only one station actually gave opportunity for somebody who lived in these areas to talk on behalf of themselves. I'm going to lose my job if I can't get to work. Talked with Police Chief Flynn about 53206. It's the highest rate of incarceration is in 53206. Talked with Battalion Chief of Emergency Medical Services Fire Department, Milwaukee Fire Department. The number one calls, the highest volume of calls for medical and health reasons is in 53206. So it's all kind of connected. These are the federal poverty guidelines. Some people ask. This is greater than minimum wage. Minimum wage is $7 and something per hour. But these are the guidelines as designated by the federal government.
So that's the wage.
Mm-hmm. This is actually higher than minimum.
I know,
yeah.
but that's the household, right?
Correct. Well, this is for a family. This is for a household of 4 people.
So that could be a full-time and a part-time worker income.
Still living, correct.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you wrap your head around the numbers and you think of people working with minimum wage. We'll talk a little bit about food share, who's on food share and what qualifies, but the majority of the people are working. So food share, it ends up being supplemental. We have a football game this afternoon, actually at 12 noon. And if you think about Lambeau Field, we're not playing at home, we're not playing at Lambeau today, but if you think about it, 80,000 people, it holds 80,000 people greater than. And if you compare that to the number of people living in poverty in the state of Wisconsin, 724,000, and just the children, 235,000, you could fill Lambeau Field 3 times with just the children living in poverty in the state of Wisconsin. And you could fill it 9 times if you took all the people living in hunger, or in poverty, and as a result, hungry. It is on the increase. You had mentioned earlier when you had started the food bank and had provided a grant for Hunger Task Force back in the 80s. You know, this should be going away, and it's not. It's actually increasing. We're on a 9 to 10 year increase of kids that qualify for free and reduced lunch in our public schools. Hunger Task Force works very closely with MPS, ensuring that kids are allowed to eat breakfast and lunch. But these are some of our advocacy focuses. So I talked a little bit about that preventing hunger, and now I want to talk a little bit about ending future hunger. So the preventing hunger was that food bank. The food bank and the pantry network and all that food being distributed free of charge to prevent hunger today. This is really where my heart is, and this is the department that I work with, is advocacy, because I think ideally we should be able to end future hunger. It's hard to wrap my head around it, living here in the United States, that it even exists. Women, Infant, and Children is one of the federally funded programs that we support. 108,000 women participate monthly, and now that you're aware of it, I hadn't noticed this until I was made aware of it. You'll see that little WIC emblem or logo on food when you go shopping. If you are a recipient of WIC, there's a list of items that you can and cannot buy, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But you're going to start seeing little identifiers. So you'll see a mom with her children walking through the store, know that she's actually scanning for that logo, because if it doesn't have that, she wouldn't be able to purchase it. Food is Fuel. This is our new branding, and I love this. These kids, and having taught at MPS, food is important. So I love the fact that they're making it, talking in its regard to being fuel, and it helps growth, esteem, self-esteem, and one's mind. We advocate for 2 things when it comes to schools and breakfast. One is that they offer breakfast at no charge. That's community eligibility provision. I'll talk a little bit about that. But also that breakfast is made part of the school day. USDA knows it as a Milwaukee model. It's breakfast after the bell. I'll talk a little bit about that. Community eligibility provision is awesome. It's available. It's 4-year reimbursement to qualifying schools that are in high impoverished areas. All of Milwaukee Public Schools have adopted this provision, which is awesome. Our outreach initiative, myself and my colleagues are doing outreach statewide. We're working with Superintendent of Green Bay currently. We just had West Allis, West Milwaukee adopt this provision, educated people in Superintendent West Bend. Because what it does is it allows kids to eat breakfast and lunch for free, and the school gets reimbursed for it. So it eliminates that stigma attached to it. Kids don't have to come early for school if they're hungry. Moms don't have to fill out the free and reduced lunch applications.
Now
So it
this
really
is-
eliminates that stigma.
This is in force now?
It's available. It's a federal program that's
Oh,
available.
it's a federal program.
Right,
The
federally
state
funded
hasn't.
program. It's federally
mixed.
funded. No, but actually, our state, it just became, they had pilot states that they actually implemented it, but this is a federally funded program. The state adopts it based on their districts and their need. But this is, so it's a lot of education, just letting them know that this is available. There's criteria. 64% of the kids have to be identified for meeting the criteria for free and reduced lunch. And they have to participate in these national programs to be eligible for it. This is where I think this is awesome. This is breakfast after the bell, and I think what it's going to do is it's going to be a shift in the paradigm. So I know I want to, they're actually thinking breakfast is a lost tradition. More and more kids aren't eating breakfast, so we want to get that back into the agenda.
Adults aren't eating.
Right? Adults aren't eating breakfast. It used to be 3 meals a day. It's almost reducing to 2.
What things do you feed for the breakfast?
The vendors are specific to the schools. So I agree too, the quality needs to be up there. We're doing a lot of education with nutrition, and we do that at the farm, teaching kids about nutrition. We're actually in 5 MPS schools right now teaching kids about nutrition, and then we invite them out to our farm, and they can plant the crops, harvest the crop, and cook the crops. So education about nutrition is important. The food that is served is based on the vendor that the district is using. So we're coupling that with education, and the quality I'm hoping is going to be, of quality. Breakfast after the bell is what I'm hoping is going to happen, is that instead of the kids, moms having to drive the kids early to school to make sure that they eat, all the kids are fed breakfast after the bell rings. So there isn't that stigma attached. I had students at high school that would come to school early because mom would drop them off early to get the food, but then they knew that their friends knew that they were coming for the breakfast. They were embarrassed. So they'd go hungry, and they wouldn't eat. And then the bell would ring and the kids would leave, and those students would come up to me afterwards and say, Miss Trace, do you have any food? Or did anybody leave their breakfast? Get rid of all of that. Because the kids shouldn't be subjected to the stigma attached with it. So what would happen is kids come to school, bell rings, you take attendance, you serve breakfast, and having been an educator, it's very easy to incorporate it into the curriculum. Regardless to what grade or if it's Common Core or not, you can incorporate eating and breakfast and lunch into the curriculum. Where did your food come from? Have a first grader, right, what color the fruit is. There's a lot of different things that would support this. And the most awesome thing about it is all the kids would be fed and ready to learn. They're finding a lot of different disparities between, or a lot of correlation between kids that are not eating. They're not ready to learn. It's my belief that achievement gap is going to shrink. My students there was a student that she had a duffel bag, and she'd walk in and she had it was all filled with chips, these bags of chips, and she'd sell them for 50 cents a piece. I'm like, Tasha, you can't do that, man. It's not cool. You can't do that at school. Poor quality food, right? But I turned it into a lesson. She's an entrepreneur, and what kind of profit do you make, and how can we flip this? But the point being is those kids were eating those chips because it's available. And then I tell them, you know what, your blood sugar is going to increase, insulin's going to kick in, it's going to take a nosedive, your blood sugar, and your head's going to hit the desk. You're not ready to learn. So food, big correlation, very close correlation between kids ready to learn and hunger. If you offer breakfast after the bell, 70% increase in kids participating in school breakfast. That's incredible. So that's our advocacy in the school programs. School takes a vacation, summer does not. I remember my students getting a little squirrely and weird towards the end of the year. Everybody's excited about summer, and some kids just were not. They'd miss that compassion and that relationship they had with their students. Some of them wouldn't eat because they depend on school to eat. Did you have a question?
Yeah, is it just Milwaukee Public Schools, or is it the charter schools, or?
Good question. MPS adopted CEP, Community Eligibility Provision. Last year, it was my objective to make sure that all the parochial schools and charter schools adopted this provision as well. So what we want them to do first is adopt that provision, Community Eligibility Provision, and that would be only schools that were 43% and above for free and reduced lunch. They'd actually qualify for it. Schools that have students at 67% or more that actually of ISP, it's called Identified Student Percentage of Kids Qualifying for Free and Reduced Lunch, their schools would make money if they offered it. So parochial schools and private schools, charter schools, anybody that had those numbers, 43% or above or 67% or above, I'd actually do outreach to and say, hey, do you know of this? And it was unbelievable how many did not know about it. And we're actually thankful we brought it to their attention. I hate to use the analogy, their plate is full, but it is. There's a lot of things, so it was really our advocacy department to bring this to the attention. This is our summer meals program. So school takes a vacation, hunger does not. We've been doing this for years. Our executive director, Sherry Tussler, with Superintendent Driver, and these beautiful little children. It reminds me of my teaching days. Each one of those balloons represents a meal site that we provided this summer. 161 sites, served 850,000 children this summer. We do outreach, and we ask kids after the meal surveys, how did you know about the meal site? They all recognize that sign. They might not even be able to read it depending on what age they are. But they recognize that sign and they know they can go there and they can feel safe and they can eat. So imagine that we couple up with Kohl's and they provided 3 meals a day. Does somebody have a question? No? Wrapping up the emphasis on ending future hunger, how do you do it? Too often I hear people saying it's intergenerational poverty. Kids grow up in poverty, they say, they stay living in a life of poverty. They only know what they're taught. There is a lot of truth to that. I've seen the vicious cycle repeat itself. But how do you stop it? In my opinion, it's this intergenerational poverty. You got to switch that up somehow. And how do you do that? Is one of the things that's important is to understand what the food security continuum is. You don't really want people dependent on that pantry network. That's a safety net, it's a security net, you don't really want people to continue to go to the pantry. You really want them out in the stores obtaining food with dignity. That's our mission statement. People should be able to obtain adequate amounts of food with dignity. The pantry network is sustaining their need for food, but it's really not the most dignified way to obtain food. The way to do that is to get them into the grocery stores. And the way that you do that is by advocating for food share. So I'd actually present this question to people, and I kind of learned about it in a roundabout way. One of my students was absent every third Thursday of the month. I had no idea why. I was like, dude, you're on habitual truancy, you need to, we're keeping track, and he'd be doing really well, and then bottom out, he's not there. It's like, you're absent like once a month, what's going on? It wasn't until I worked for Hunger Task Force that I saw, when I'm at the pantry, the children accompanying their mothers to the pantry that day to carry the food home. I'm thinking, these kids should be in school. So I'm realizing this is what you ask them, where do you get food? They're gonna say the food pantry. So if you were to ask yourself, would you rather see children accompanying mom into the pantry network, or would you rather see the kids accompanying their mother into the grocery store? I think we would agree the grocery store. This is how you're gonna break that intergenerational poverty. Because there's some kids, they don't go to the grocery store, they go to the pantry. And they actually take off to school in order to accommodate mom. So food share, it gets people in the grocery store, which is more dignified and less dependent on the pantries. Usually people confuse, if I were to ask people how many have heard of food sharing here, and then if I ask how many people have heard of food stamps, everybody's hands go up. Food share, food stamps are the same thing. It's an entitlement program, which I do this because there's a lot of negative connotations associated with these entitlement programs, alleged abuse, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But really, it's the first line of defense against hunger in Wisconsin. Think of food share at a glance. 2007 to 2012, the darker burgundies and purples, 20% or more people are enrolled in food share. 1 in 7 of people in Wisconsin are enrolled in food share. 1 out of 3 just in Milwaukee County.
Is that free, or do you have to pay something for the meals?
For food share?
Yeah.
Really, what you do is you apply for it online. It's income eligible. You're income eligible, and depending on your household size. So I can go online, access website. I can apply for food share. Depends on how much money I make, my household size. If I qualify as an individual, I'll get $104.90. So that fluctuates a little bit, and that's paid for 100% by the federal government. So I get what's called a Quest card. And I can actually take that into grocery stores and buy food. And I'll talk a little bit about what you can and cannot purchase with a food share card. But I'd get that money paid for 100% by the federal government on my Quest card. And it's automatically put on there once a month.
And if you have no access to a computer?
We're doing a lot of different outreach. Personally, Hunger Task Force, we have tablets. We have people going, our food share team will go out into different pantry networks and help people with tablets sign up. There's paper applications. We encourage people on the outskirts, Manitowoc, Janesville, where I've been. You had mentioned somebody from another county, correct? They can go to a library, or there are paper applications as well. But I think it's the modernization here to apply for food share in Wisconsin is awesome. It reduces the fraud rate. We don't have a high fraud rate. And, I think it streamlined it's the system, the application process, so it's good. So obviously the computer, and if they don't have a computer, libraries. If we don't come into their location with a tablet, but you need Wi-Fi, so.
So that map you just showed us between 2007 and, was it 2012?
Mhm.
Is the big difference in the increased number of people signing up for food share because the need changed dramatically, or because of things like those groups of people
Modernization,
going out to?
in my opinion, it's identifying the folks that, educating people that it's available and identifying the need. And I'll talk a little bit about policies and how those numbers are gonna increase based on policies. And some of that is because of policies, but I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide.
Do you decide on your distribution sites according to how many other places provide food? Do you know where the food is available at other places aside from,
Our network?
Yeah.
Our
Is there
network,
an
in fact,
overall picture
there's-
of the food?
There's currently, in order to be part of our network, there's a standards of excellence you need to adhere to. Our statement, people should be able to obtain food with dignity, that's really important. So if you're part of our network, you adhere to a standards of excellence, which has to do with food handling, foods elevated from off the floor, away from the wall. It is need-based, but you also, in order to be in our pantry, you have to adhere to the standards of excellence and also go through annual civil rights training. So we do what we do really well, but we do keep it local so that we can sustain that standards of excellence and make sure that people are obtaining food with dignity, and we can keep and provide the food. I mean, our pantry, 9.4 million pounds of food last year. We're gonna do what we gotta do to make sure we provide for the people in our network. But we'll talk a little bit about policies, about the negative impact, and that we may run out of food. Hunger Task Force ran out of food with the welfare reform. And we'll talk a little bit about policies in the next few slides where we may run out of food. Projections are that we may.
That says, average monthly food share per client. How,
This
what
would
is
be
a
for an
cli-
individual. It'd be for an individual,
Okay,
not a
so-
household, correct.
So does that include children?
This will be per person, and depending on how many people are in the household, you'll actually get more money. So that it would fluctuate based on your household size, and we'll talk about what percentage of our children.
So now they're proposing that you have to have a, picture ID.
Yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about that, I know. I think we're on the same page with that. I can tell by the look on your face. Because first we know, food share, 100% paid for by the federal government, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But when people say, oh, they're lazy, they need to go to work, there's a lot of stigma attached to it. If you think of these numbers, this was back in June 2015 as reported by Wisconsin Department of Health. 41% of the folks that are recipients of food share are children. All right, if we don't support our children, right, we're gonna break that intergenerational poverty. How are we gonna expect kids to achieve these educational goals if they're not even fed appropriately? Elderly, blind, disabled, 22%. And then these are the percentages: adults, employed adults, 40%, and households, 32%. So people are working that are receiving food share. So food share on a national level is called SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And the reason I bring that up, you're going to hear it interchange: food share, SNAP, entitlement program, it's all the same thing. In the state of Wisconsin, we call it food share. Formerly, we called it food stamps. It's all the same thing. It's not a stamp anymore, it's a Quest card, or an EBT, electronic benefit transfer card. But it's supplemental. It's supplemental, it's not, the majority of the folks are working and they just need that help. People on food share are experiencing what's called food insecurity, and what that is somebody having to decide, am I gonna pay for my heat, which is gonna be a real issue in the next coming months? Am I gonna pay for my medication? So utility bills, or am I gonna buy food? If you think about that, having to make that decision. I've met families where the mom drinks a lot of water so that she feels full, so her kids can eat. People who let the kids eat first before they themselves eat. I met a gentleman at a senior stock box location that said he grinds his food to make it last longer. A 23-year-old in Janesville that's living in her car, she's homeless, she can go 3 days without eating food. She actually turned off that little indicator in her brain that says, you know what, you're hungry, you need to eat. And then she feels bad when she gets $7 or $8 or $9 and she goes to McDonald's and gets a supersized meal. She said it's like an addiction, and I know it's bad, but it's these people and what they have to do and the reality that's surrounding hunger in our community, just, it never ceases to amaze me. Sometimes it doesn't get the attention of people unless it affects them personally. Well, the healthcare system is really starting to perk up because people living with a food insecurity negatively impact our healthcare system. If I'm food insecure, I am more likely to experience diabetes, hypertension, depression, and obesity. Hypertension, sometimes some of these things are associated with the stress, right? Responsible for having to feed your family and yourself. But sometimes when you're living on a non-perishable diet of foods that are high in sodium. I met a woman who's diabetic. We do have a diabetic-friendly pantry in our network. She was diabetic, and she had stated, we talked about food choice, what you can and cannot buy on Food Share. I'll talk a little bit about that. But her thought was, it's not about preference, it's about a necessity. I need to buy certain foods to be healthy, so we need to support that.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you showed us that WIC,
The WIC?
the WIC, the symbol that they needed, is that for you, that has to be there for you to use your food, your Quest, or your SNAP card or your Food Share card to buy things? If you don't have that symbol, you can't use that card?
So currently, there's a list of items, I don't think I have it available with me now, and there's a WIC list, it's called. You can get it on the USDA of what people can and cannot buy. And typically these women, when they go through the educational process, they'll be told what they can and cannot buy with it. It's brand specific for WIC. And I did see that logo. That logo is not, it may not be everywhere. I think it would depend on the grocer. And it doesn't indicate, from my experience, what you can buy for Food Share. Currently, we'll talk a little bit about food choice. Because there's a bill out there right now where they actually want to limit food choice for Food Share recipients. And what it's going to be is the WIC list. It's going to follow that list plus a few other items, like potatoes. And I can't remember if it's the white potatoes or the red potatoes, but it's really absurd what people can and cannot buy.
And from what I understand, it doesn't mean that they cannot buy anything else. It's just that WIC is only going to pay for these things on this list.
So
Yeah, so it's if they want to use their WIC benefits
So at the
towards those
checkout
things.
is where it's decided.
It's where it's
that
decided.
it's- Yeah,
And
according to the list they have, where
Correct, yeah.
they can include that on their SNAP.
Correct, and I spoke at Marquette. There's a woman in the audience, a student in the audience, young lady, who said she was a cashier. And sure enough, it will tell you. So really, some of these things, it actually further stigmatizes people. And we'll talk a little bit about the other policies. But if you think of just the impact it's having on the healthcare system, the Affordable Health Care Act right now that they're implementing and how to project the cost of healthcare, I'm working with Milwaukee Fire Department. They're doing mobile integration where they have the paramedics now going and doing outreach into the community. They targeted, their pilot group was a group of high utilizers of 911. United Healthcare identified one individual who cost the healthcare system $1 million in a year because of his use of 911. Sometimes it's, I'm hungry. In fact, a paramedic went up to a gentleman's house for this paramedic integrated mobile health, and they had an appointment, and he's talking with this gentleman, and who pulls up? Paratech ambulance. I used to be an EMT for Paratech. Pulls up and he tells the paramedic, my ride's here. I said, what do you mean your ride's here? They go, and I've seen this, and I don't like this is not a gross generalization, but I've personally seen where people come in, my stomach hurts, they determine whether or not they're gonna do what kind of work upon this individual, right? But ultimately they discharge him and they feed him a sandwich and they go home. But food insecurity has a huge impact, negative impact on healthcare. So we're gonna be seeing a lot more about this. Well, how do you diminish this? You get people on Food Share out in the grocery stores eating, right? Purchasing food, it makes sense. 80 to 90% of the purchases made on Food Share are wholesome. And they're all spent, so that money comes on my Quest card. The Quest card is called EBT. Sometimes you'll see that's electronic benefit transfer. Because it's an electronic benefit transfer, they can stipulate what's been purchased with it. It's wholesome foods. You cannot buy drugs and alcohol, you cannot buy tobacco products, you cannot buy pet food, and you cannot buy personal items. It's just food, and it's wholesome food choices. Usually, I think it's within 2 weeks, 85% of the purchase, the benefits are already utilized. And we actually see an increase in our pantry network at the end of the month. Why? Because food share ran out. So these, it's very well supported through data.
You mentioned to us like 211? Which I
211.
had never heard of before.
Yeah, you're gonna hear a little more about it, 'cause it's
Okay.
awesome. Yeah, it is, that's important, I'm glad you brought that up. I've had, childhood obesity is on the rise. So people say people in poverty, they're obese, they don't need food. It's basically because of food items that they have in those food deserts I referenced earlier. 53206 has corner stores. A lot of corner stores, and they'll say, WIC, we accept WIC, we accept EBT, Quest, Food Share. But they're food that is lacking in what they call micronutrients. So there they can buy a loaf of white bread, eat that whole loaf of white bread before they feel full, but it's still lacking in micronutrients. So the caloric intake is great. We have a lot of calories, but not the nutrients. Whereas if we can go to whole, Sendix and Whole Foods and Outpost, we can get that 12-grain bread, but that's not available for people who are living in poverty and food deserts. So they are eating a diet that's lacking in micronutrients. And this is what we do at our school. This was actually just a few weeks ago I took these photos. Buses pull up, we educate the kids on good nutrition, and then they cook it, serve it up, they eat it. Food share is good for the economy. I didn't know this. A lot of people didn't know this. For every $1 that's put on my Quest card that I spend in the community, it generates $1. It went up to $1.80. Did I update this? Yeah. It was $1.79, went to $1.80. It generates an economic activity. So nearly $2 billion was actually generated in the state, just in the state of Wisconsin. And this is where people get really confused, and this is where we're going to go into the policies as we wrap up here. Food Share is a federally funded program, so all of those benefits that go on my Quest card are put on by the federal government. The administration fees to administer the distribution of the cards and the system itself is paid for 50-50 federal government and state. But otherwise, the benefits themselves are all paid for 100% by the federal government. The reason that's important is because you have bills, and this is just some, and there's always more, that are proposed by by legislation. Just these first two are bills that are pending that will really alleviate hunger. School breakfast bill, yeah, let's make sure all our kids eat breakfast. Let's make sure it's served after the bell. That's awesome. That's going to feed kids. Grow Wisconsin is a bill that's pending right now that states that if I use my Quest card or EBT card and I buy Wisconsin grown food at farmers markets, which is awesome, that amount of money I spend will be matched. So it's an incentive program to buy Wisconsin grown food. That's awesome. That's going to feed people. The rest of these are programs and policies that further erode food share. They sound good on the surface. For example, drug testing. On my Facebook newsfeed, it said we have to drug test welfare recipients. And I thought, well, I worked in public service, sheriff's department, law enforcement, educator. I had to be drug tested. So I thought, just on the surface, it just kind of made sense. Not that I really had an opinion one way or another. But if you scratch the surface ever so gently and you think about this, there is no stigma. There's no correlation between people living in poverty and drug abuse. There's just no correlation. But yet they do this. It sounds good, and it gets votes. Currently, they're going to drug test recipients of food share that are between the ages of 18 and 49. And what's going to happen is when you go to the pantry and you meet these homeless gentlemen at the guest house, or you meet these people, it's incredibly humiliating to ask them to submit a urine specimen. I met with the AIDS Resource Center of Wisconsin. Folks with AIDS receive medication that stimulates their appetite. It's synthetic THC. They are going to test positive. So there's more barriers and more hoops, and will they be able to justify it? Yes. But why should they have to justify it? Why are we further stigmatizing people living in poverty by imposing these? Replacement cards.
Is there a test done? I know Florida was the first state that actually implemented it on the drug test side. Is there now data out there showing the amount of cost the state on the drug testing compared to the impact of actually of it?
There is, and I'm glad you brought that up. Less than 2 to 3% test positive, and the other states have tried it. It's incredibly expensive. We implement this, it's gonna cost taxpayers 50% of the $2.9 million just to implement it, and an additional 50% of that $1.1 million to sustain it annually. But we do have policy papers, I didn't bring one with me, but at the end or follow up with me, I can give, we have policy papers, 2-3 page reports of all those stats. Because we'll go to the committee meetings and we'll testify, and they need numbers. And then we have data to support.
And then is there a number that shows that if they were to use that money for drug testing, how many more people they could have fed with that?
Well, it's interesting. This bill actually was signed into law by Governor Walker with some caveats. We are no longer going to provide state-funded rehab, because we said, well, okay, if they test positive, what are you going to do? Starve them? Oh no, we'll put them through treatment. Well, now that's no longer the case. The other thing is you don't need suspicion to drug test them, and that's actually a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So it's stirring at state level, but when it goes to federal, it's going to be bounced back again. So this is probably short-lived, but meanwhile, just incredibly costly.
Not including the court costs of defending it.
Well, that's the other thing. I know, if you think of all the costs incurred, and you know what's a shame, and there is a slide here that talks to, it talks to the point of how things are decided and why we just need more voices to talk, to spread the word of the reality of it. Replacement cards, there's thought that people are selling their cards, so then they're asking for new ones, and that's burdening the system, so let's start charging people. Not real cool, but these are the costs. 50% of the top number to implement, 50% of the lower number to sustain annually. This is the limiting food share choice. So they're going to determine what people can and cannot buy on food share, and it is as absurd as what color the salmon is, pink salmon or white salmon. You cannot buy ragu, but you can buy tomato sauce. And I'm not really sure, I didn't really look into very closely as to why this is, if it's brand specific or what the underlying rationale is. But I have seen a gentleman at the store who reminds me of my father asking me if I could help him find salmon. He had his coat on and he had his cane and he's just walking, he was a little confused. I said, sir, can I help you? Yeah, can you help me find pink salmon? And I'm thinking it's really cool that this guy is finding pink salmon, it's like this is awesome, you want something that's specific. But then it dawned on me, it's because that's what he could buy. That's what he could buy. That's something that was allowed. So it just actually, this $150,000 to outfit all the cashiers and talk to all the grocery associations and train the cashiers. 50% of the $3.5 million to sustain this annually if they pass that. Limiting food share choice is actually going through the committees right now. Food share photo ID, this is actually passed, I believe, the Assembly, and then it goes to the Senate. Very, very close into being signed into law. Further stigmatizes people. If you use your credit card to go shopping, you use your debit card, I use my Quest card or my food share, I should not be stopped. They do have in the bill, to my understanding, that cashiers can't ask them for, they can't look and compare. Then what's the rationale behind it? It doesn't make sense. Currently, the security, the PIN number like we use is what they have. That should be sufficient. Further stigmatizing people, and additionally, incredibly costly. 50% of the $7.4 million to implement it, network a database that could do it in the first place, and 50% of that $2 million to sustain it. And then just in wrapping up here, the way something happens with a bill. So a bill is, I have an idea, I draft it with different authors, and then it passes different committees, Joint Finance Committee, different committees, and then it goes into the Senate, a full Assembly, Senate, and gets signed into law. This AB 177 is regarding food choice, that limiting food choice, and it states there that it would be outlined by WIC, and then some additional items would be added to it. So I'm listening to this at work. I have it plugged into my ear. I'm streaming this, listening to this, this testimony and this meeting, and I hear this gentleman say, it's the author of the bill. He wanted to do this because he wanted to curb such abuses as someone using food share system to buy $62 worth of jelly beans. And then it stated that his defense drew a bipartisan applause on the floor. So here I am, up to here with like commitment and passion. And I hear these guys and women who can make these decisions laughing, and it just, I thought, I couldn't believe it. It just stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, the people that are making decisions are so far removed from the reality. And I know for a fact, if he were to accompany me to the pantry system, he wouldn't say that. I know that. I know his heart's probably good, you know, but that you can say such flippant, disrespectful statements like this. And this is a governing body that's going to make the decisions.
Yeah.
So that got me a little riled. I just, you know, that resonates with me, but this just reminds me of how far removed people are from the reality. So I should really go look him up. I took his name out because it's not, I talk policy, not politics. But I do want to go back and look him up and see if I can invite him, you know, come with me for a day.
It's so dehumanizing too, because if I have $62 to spend and I want to buy jelly beans, no one's going to say anything to me. But if I'm like deciding what someone else can use their money for, then I am allowed to judge whatever they buy. Like, no person should, I mean, that, you're right, a person would likely not go buy $60
Right.
worth of jelly beans, but why is there any moral statement attached to that if they want to? There isn't if I want to, or any person in the Congress.
No, absolutely. And thank you for sharing. That's true. That's true. I mean, I'm listening to this and I'm real intent on what's happening, and then I hear this. It just reset my inner cloud. It woke me up. That's for sure. And this is the unfortunate reality of food share. When we were talking about people increasing, you know, whether more people get enrolled or disenroll. Disenroll means they no longer receive their benefits. This is state issuance based on policy. So you had we had the welfare reform. People fell off of food share. Depending on more of these policies, whether they pass, more people are going to fall off of food share. There's one that's called Food Share Employment and Training. It's referred to as FSET. It's only regarding those that are 18 to 49 on food share, called ABOD, Able Body Adults Without Dependents. It's a lot of words, a lot of acronyms and jargon. Point being, if you're between 18 and 49, you're referred to as an able-bodied adult. And if you don't have dependents or another exemption, there's several of them, you will get your benefits for 3 consecutive months on food share card. And then you will no longer get them for up to 3 years unless you show that you're working 20 hours a week or you meet one of these exemptions, and there's a few exemptions. The bad thing is this was actually the training for FSET was given to a company that's not really born and raised with no commitment here to Wisconsin. Very, very poorly run. The recipients of food share didn't know what was happening other than the 1,000 I did outreach to saying, hey, you know what, this is happening, take it seriously. As a result of it, people are falling off of food share. So if you're 18 to 49, you apply for food share, you do your renewal annually. If I'm between those ages, I don't show I'm exempt, I don't show I'm working, I'll get those benefits for 3 months. And what's happening is people are going to the store that 4th month and they're declined and they don't know why. And they're hustling, they're trying to figure it out, and they're making calls. A lot of the calls are coming to Hunger Task Force because we're advocates. We're trying to get a waiver for this county to say, hey, you know what? DHS, Department of Health Services, was put in corrective action by the USDA because they didn't implement this program appropriately. As a result, people are falling off of food share. So Hunger Task Force, I did the outreach to educate people. It's not doing a good job because what we had projected is that 14,000 people would fall off of food share as a result of this food share employment training bill that passed. 8,000 fell off or were disenrolled within 3 months. So we're looking at 4 times that amount annually falling off of food share, and as a result, they're going to go, where do you go if you're not going to the grocery store with food share? You're going to the pantries. And who sustains the pantries? All of us, right? So we already distributed 9.4 million pounds of food last year, you know, including the million pounds of food from our farm. We will not be able to handle the amount of food that's required to sustain hunger. Did you have a question?
You know what? You lost me completely.
I'm sorry.
I don't understand what you're talking about here. Why is this happening?
Well, for example, here, okay, so in April of 2015, they signed into law one of those policies. We had
Who's there?
the government, Walker. Yeah, Governor Walker. State, it's state. Yep, it's state. So the bills that we're talking about state here. So there's policies. So food share is a federally funded program. But by state, they can implement different legislation that's attached to that program. Wisconsin has different bills that are attached to food share that in essence further erodes that federally funded program. One of them being, and it is a lot of words, so I apologize, it's a lot of stuff. One of those bills was the drug testing, one of them was the limiting food choice, one of them is the photo on the ID. So those are all bills that are state.
So all of those together are resulting in this chart here.
Correct, a decline. So this is the issuance trends in millions of dollars of people falling, people falling off of food share. For example, the bill that I was just referencing, food share employment and training, and that's just, it affects people between 18 and 49, they're called ABODs. As a result of that bill that passed and was implemented April 1st, this is where we're starting to see the decline. People are falling off of food share. And it's because they're not meeting the requirement or they can't meet the requirement to work. What food share employment training says is if you're 18 to 49 and you're on food share, you need to work. Well, there's a lot of reasons why people aren't working. When I went to the guest house and I had 50 homeless gentlemen looking at me, and when you grow up in poverty and you don't have dental care, they don't have the confidence, they don't have the skill set, and furthermore, we don't have the jobs.
Yeah, right.
You know, we had previously had a waiver, Governor Walker had a waiver, we didn't, because this same bill had been done in other states. But when it came to Wisconsin, we signed a waiver saying we just didn't have the jobs. And then it was like, okay, suddenly we have the jobs. I'm not sure really where they are, but the Governor Walker said these people can go to work. But as a result of that specific policy being written into law April 1st, they get their benefits for 3 months, April, May, June, and July, and then they start to fall off, which means that they no longer get benefits on their card. This number is plummeting. This is going way down. We just had a new update on that, where we thought it'd be 14,000 people falling off of food share. It was 8,000 in 3 months.
But up at the top, it says in millions. Millions of what? We don't have 100 million.
You know, it's dollars and benefits.
Dollars.
Dollars.
It's dollars of federally funded.
So it doesn't show the numbers, it shows
The
the dollars.
issuance of benefits put on the Quest card. And I think I did misspeak and said people first, but it's actually the issuance of the benefits put on the Quest card.
So, if you require working in a job, but you don't have daycare or childcare, how are you supposed to?
There's what they refer to, and this can get really complicated, allowable work programs. One of them is W-2, and W-2 does provide childcare. So, actually, I wish, what I could do too is really provide our FSET policy paper that's gonna be updated with current numbers. And I'll make them available, and I'll let you guys know that they are available, or connect with me after the fact, and I can make sure I can meet with you and talk to you through that, because that one really is, you're gonna see a lot of it in the news now. It's work for food share employment training, FSET, you're gonna hear about it in the news.
You know, FSET's a decades-old program, and I used to not work in FSET, but refer people to it. And our partner was MATC. And, I mean, it's just, people's lives are so complicated. Most of the people I referred to the FSET training, it's a training program. Well, earning your GED is part of that.
Correct.
But they couldn't organize, people in poverty have trouble, well, I have trouble organizing their lives, and to get to MATC, a structured GED program, that you gotta test out of, and they've increased the standards on the GED, which is good. But it's another thing that they have to do in order to eat. They've gotta get their GED. And you want people to have their high school education or GEDs. We go, yeah, but it's a barrier when you're hungry.
There's there's things that you said there that are so profound. A barrier is one more step, and that living in poverty is a hustle. It is hard work. I met with somebody, was a victim a victim of the FSET program. I fell off of, I'm not getting my benefits, what do I need to do? Because not only do you need to fulfill the obligation of working or being enrolled in school, you have to document it and verify it. So when you apply for food share, within 10 days you have to verify it. Well, people weren't doing that for whatever reasons, right? But this kid's calling me on the phone. He can't get a hold of me because he's at MATC class. And then he can't meet with me because he's taking a bus all the way out to Quad Graphics to fulfill his work requirement. He's just like, how do I make this happen? It's yet another barrier. Question?
And you may have covered this already, I had to obviously step out for a second, but, so obviously poverty is a cycle, right?
Mhm.
Unless there's organizations and a government level that steps in to try to break that cycle. So obviously you're at the end of the cycle, right? You're individuals who are, seeking food because everything else that they can't, get together is they're hustling.
Right.
What does Hunger Task Force do any kind of alignment with any other nonprofit organizations that try to start breaking that circle with an impact of it?
The cycle, there is something, there's a local food network,
Okay.
and they're trying to implement different things that I'm not really well versed in. One of
Sure.
them is sustainable foods and moving food that would otherwise go to waste. Currently, what we're doing
One more
is through those.
ministry.
Yeah.
One more meal
Oh, and
ministry.
and actually, and you're gonna be a partner, aren't you? Who spoke with?
We've been doing
Yeah.
it.
No, who spoke with me just recently, just
He
before?
was right up here.
Oh, he left?
Chris
Somebody's
Capper.
joining our network.
Chris Capper, yeah.
So it's
Start
really,
already?
it's so really presenting and educating and networking with people. Currently, our mission is twofold. It's really preventing it through that pantry network
Sure.
and making sure we can meet people's needs through that preventative, but also advocating for future policies. And there's a quote, next few slides from Sherry Tussler, our executive director, that in my mind really just wraps it up in a nutshell.
Sure.
You had mentioned about 211. I was a 911 operator, so 500 calls per shift. It's Sheriff's Department, imminent life-threatening danger. You can dial 211. I'm in a domestic bad relationship, violent relationship. I'm hungry. I'm homeless. I have alcohol, drug problems. You dial 211, they're going to get you some help. You can dial 211. The number one call to 211 currently, 27% is I'm hungry. If you dial 211, they're going to refer you to somebody in our network.
So
So
211 is kind of the answer to that.
211 is, that'd be another piece of the puzzle,
Okay.
right?
What was the other one?
Are you talking about the local food network?
I'm just
It's
saying in general.
how we work. Well, there's different networks that are out there currently.
Okay.
One of them is moving food that would otherwise go to waste.
Sure. But is there one specifically with Hunger Task Force?
It's really fulfilling our pantry
Okay.
network and then doing the advocacy piece.
Advocacy,
Yeah,
sure.
so our approach to it is really twofold.
Sure.
It's preventing hunger, but then ending it.
Sure.
And we end it through advocacy.
Do you know how many, what percentage of folks who use Hunger Task Force's food pantry or associated food pantries are on food stamps or do have Quest cards?
That's a good question, and his question is, what's the association with people in our network and those on food share? One of the questions in intake, when you go to a pantry, it's going to be based on your zip code, and you can go, and there's an intake process. And one of the questions in that process are you on food share? And if they say no, why not? Because it's a good thing. And then we have probably about 8 to 10 outreach folks on our food share staff that will go to the pantries. They just keep rotating through them, and they become, like I was at River West Pantry not long ago, just educating people on it. Do you know this is available?
So, but you think if people are on food share that they would be much less likely to go to the pantries for the assistance that they need there?
We know that for a fact, because what we see is after their benefits run out at the end of the month, our pantry numbers
Starts
increase.
increasing.
Yeah, so they say if you want to do outreach at a pantry, do it towards the end of the month, that's when the numbers are higher. And I think it's also gonna switch up that intergenerational poverty, because it's gonna teach kids that you get food from a grocery store, and teach them how to obtain food with dignity, and that's what that is. Some kids don't know. We had a pediatrician actually gave turnips to some kids to wash during a program, and the kids said no, they didn't want it because there was dirt on the turnips. They didn't know that it came from the ground. I mean, so this is, by no means am I making gross generalizations about, but people only know what they're taught. They don't, and if they don't have those exposures of growing up on a farm or seeing produce available, if what they get is food in a box, it's unbelievable. But satisfaction is among the lowest when it comes to the federal government and how they're dealing with poverty, and that's across the political parties. So we're at an all-time low federally. And so how do you change this? And this is, you vote. You vote for policies. This is a statement. Sherry Tussler, our executive director, is an expert in what she does and was invited to talk with the Congress before the Congress last year. And so she states here that last year, local corporations and donations that I had referred to earlier, $6.1 million. But that really needs to be seen as an unsustainable gift, because we, the people, and the villages, and all of us are compassionate. It's a testament to how compassionate people are. But are we really going to be able to continue to provide food? So in her opinion, in closing here, she stated it's really the responsibility of the government. You know, and how do you affect that? One is through educating, understanding policies, federally funded programs, what food share is, how it benefits people. The other, so this is what we do here at Hunger Task Force: educate, organize, lobby, research, but really to influence public policy while preventing it meeting the needs of our pantry network. This is State Representative Bowen and Brostoff joined what we refer to as Voices Against Hunger. This is something you can sign up with on our website, hungertaskforce.org. What we do is we assemble all the stats and statistics, get the policy papers, and we present them to you as frequently as required. If, say, for example, a state representative on a committee lives in your zip code or his district, we're going to send you an email if your Voices Against Hunger saying sign a petition, because your constituent, your state representative will bring this to the committee and present on your behalf. Because really, they need to hear from their constituents, in addition to Hunger Task Force, which they do. But Voices Against Hunger, we do all the work. We'll just send you a petition. You just enter your name. We have form letters. You just enter your name, hit send, it goes to state representative or senator, and then you get the thank you from them. But this is how we would keep you informed on different policies and legislation that's further eroding food share, or as a result, increasing hunger, which is unfortunate, when you think about it. But this is my name. I would be happy to go to any other organizations, educational facilities. I go to schools, universities, all over to present statewide regarding this. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. If you want any more policy papers, anything real specific to any one of these things, I'd be happy to provide that for you. We had talked a little bit about volunteer work. That's always an option. Food drives. I left information over here that you can take with you. Our holiday cards, awesome opportunity. Proceeds go to Hunger Task Force. This is our quarterly newsletter, and in here it references our food drives, Food for Families, now up and running. Awesome. We're going to need more food than ever because of these policies. Talks about shaming the poor, which is one of the policies I referenced here. Talks about our farm and just different options. I also included some stats called a quick facts sheet, just talking about numbers in our community. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Any questions today? No?
Do you visit many churches with your staff?
Yes. Yes, I am doing there's something that I do that's called a program I facilitate called Food for Today. And I'll do that oftentimes at congregations, different locations, universities, school districts. It's living the life of somebody in poverty. And so it's a 90-minute program, and you get 3 days or 8 minutes apiece, and you get a character of somebody living in poverty. For example, Harvey Hillsdale. I'm Harvey Hillsdale. I have 8 children, and I have $5 to get food for that day. It's called Food for Today. And then we have 7 tables lined up, assembled. So it's WIC, social services, grocery store, corner store, farmer's market, and 211. And so I say the sun has risen, they open their envelope, they read their scenario, they have whatever amount of money they have, and they run around and they try to get food for that day. And then I say sunset, and they take notes. How well did that go for you? So when you talk about, did you do that once?
Oh, I thought we had.
Because when you had mentioned it's you know, transportation's an issue, some of those scenarios have transportation cards, some do not, and it really, it negatively impacts their ability to get food. Yeah, it's interesting, I'm doing it for WizCab,
The legislators
Confirm that.
Yeah, it's interesting, it's a cool program, but, yeah, we go all over, I go all over.